So for those of you wondering what's going on there, there's somebody else from Ireland in the chat saying hello. We've had 2 minutes past the hour, so I'm going to kick off with this presentation. So good afternoon. My name is Alan Burke, developer and director at Anartech, Ireland's leading Drupal agency. We're going to be giving a talk today on CarsIreland and how it works and what makes it fast. So hopefully you're all in the right room. So let's kick off with a screen share. And hopefully we're seeing a presentation. Okay, so that's the title of the presentation. I don't have access to the chat while I'm giving the presentation, so if there's anything that is particularly important, it'll just have to wait. So the title, 50,000 ads and growing, sorting and searching the good from the bad, how we built CarsIreland.ie. So we'll start. If you're wondering why there's a number of bicycles in the background of this video, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about cars, and I like bikes, so I decided it was time for a bit of balance in the visuals in this presentation. There's not an awful lot of text in these slides. I prefer to talk about what is going on, and then people can ask questions. So just give an overview of what we're going to go through today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the business of CarsIreland.ie. We'll talk a bit about how that works and what it does, and it's relevant because a number of the decisions we made are very relevant to how the business works. Then we'll have a talk about the website itself, or a general overview of the website, including its old platform and its new API that it built to serve the website. We'll have a talk about why Drupal was chosen for this application. It was part of a rigorous, the result of a rigorous selection process that we weren't necessarily, as we in Anartech, weren't fully involved with. We were brought in as the Drupal experts. We're going to chat about why Typesense was chosen as the search interface for this site. This wasn't something that was there at the very start of the project. We'll talk about a concept that we refer to as generating the website. So this isn't I guess, standard Drupal website that all the content is primary sources on the Drupal website. Drupal is not the single source of truth. It is mainly a reporting tool or a different visualization of the data that exists for the organization. We'll talk a little bit about some custom analytics. It's one of the more interesting parts of the website and a key part of how the business functions. We'll talk about the upstream reporting requirements. We're not just consuming the CarsIreland API, we're also sending information back upstream to CarsIreland API, to their API, so they can make decisions and report on things. We'll talk about the challenges developers faced during the project, and I mean that in both senses, the things that were both difficult and interesting. We'll talk about some potential future enhancements that we have in mind for the platform, things we might have done slightly differently, or at least we're in a position to do now at this stage. But before all that, I'm going to summon the demo gods and attempt a live demo. So we flick back here to the CarsIreland website. For those of you joining us from outside of Ireland, there is a chance that this site is geo-blocked. This decision it's outside of our control, but basically they've had a lot of problem with scrapers and basically bad traffic in general. So a decision was made to just geo-block an awful lot of countries. From the business perspective, this makes a lot of sense because they don't spend any money on bandwidth sending information to places where they can't buy the cars. So they're happy enough with that decision. So just to be aware of that. But in any case, this is the homepage of the site. So what we have here is, it's a Drupal node essentially, and we've got a number of parts of the website being displayed, like a featured dealer, which changes every 15 minutes or so. We've recently added content. That changes again about every 15 minutes. We'll talk about the caching strategies at some point later. But one of the key parts of the homepage is this mini search application. This is actually a little mini React application, and it delivers a blazingly fast search, or at least I hope it's blazingly fast over my 4G connection. So as I type keys, it does an immediate search and gives me different options. And then immediately the results are updated in that. And what's happening there in the background is this isn't actually hitting Drupal at all. This is sending the keystrokes back via the Typesense cloud API and getting results back and updating the interface straight away. When we click on search, we are brought to a new Drupal page, the /search page. But that in itself is actually just another React application. So what it's doing here is bringing up the content, and this content all this content comes directly from the Typesense API and is rendered on screen using the Drupal using Drupal's JavaScript. The images themselves come from another media service. So for a lot of traffic on the site, it does mean that Drupal isn't actually touched at all. So this page is served by Cloudflare and it's cached for at least 30 minutes. And then that means that everybody, when they're browsing the site, even in times of high traffic, we keep a significant amount of load off the Drupal servers because we can handle all this at the edge. In terms of the search interface itself, it's an instant search. As soon as I change a parameter here, the search result is updated. Let's check. So that's the search interface. There's a couple of other pages of interest on the site I want to show you. This is when you click through to the cars themselves, this is the kind of thing that you get. So this is a very typical car for Ireland, modestly priced Rolls-Royce, if anyone is interested. So basically, what happened here, this is just a Drupal node that we take the information from their API and generate these Drupal nodes. So we also have nodes for the dealers as well. But that comprises most of the content on the website. I want to draw your attention to one other type of page that we didn't really see as we navigated through the site. This is a search engine results page. So these pages are generated using search engine friendly URLs, using the search engine API, the search API backed by Solar as a search engine. So these are not served by or generated by the Typesense API, at least not currently. They're generated by Drupal Search API using Solar as the backend. And that means that these pages are actual HTML, and we are confident in their cacheability and their SEO friendliness. But as soon as if you navigate through these here, you keep hitting search engine friendly pages that are still just generated HTML. But as soon as you interact with the interface here, it takes your search parameters and redirects you back to the search page. So that's the search. And lastly, we'll talk about this later on. As you navigate around the pages on the site, if you do things like open up the dimensions thing, we'll send some upstream data. So this is an upstream request back to Cars Ireland's customs analytics engine, which this basically records that event happening on the page. So we do a number of things where we record on-page activity and send it to a custom analytics engine. So that's a broad overview of the site itself. And we'll talk briefly then about Cars Ireland, the business. So Cars Ireland itself has been around since 2004. It's a long-running business, and it's one of Ireland's largest car classified ads. There are a number of them around the place, but Cars Ireland is one of the larger ones. It itself is part of the Independent Media Group, so that's a very large media group within Ireland. Number of daily broadsheets and tabloids and a number of web properties. And that Independent Media Group, even as part of the project we were doing it, or during the course of the project that we were working on, that itself got transferred to a Belgian multinational entity called Media House. And that in itself is interesting because they've got a number of classified ads, and they're currently looking at what platform they might have in the long term. So they're giving close consideration to the architectural decisions we took on this website and whether any of them would be of use to them going forward as well. What distinguishes Cars Ireland from their competitors is their close relationship with the dealers. So unlike some of the other websites where they focus on the, I suppose, one-to-one sale of a car. So I, as an individual, want to sell my car online. I upload an ad, upload some images, and I try and sell it direct. Cars Ireland's data set comes from the dealers themselves. And the API that's there, or at least the database that's there, is often used to generate custom websites for the dealers themselves as well. The dealers can upload their data in a one-stop shop fashion, so that it serves the Cars Ireland website, the Cars Ireland native apps, and indeed their own websites as well. So this is a pretty good selling point that Cars Ireland have, and it's one of the reasons for their success. And when we were building the website, a lot of the requirements were driven by what dealers needed. They had a very key input into decisions that we took on the site itself. So as well, the way we consume the data from, or we as in the website, the Drupal website consumes the data is through an API. But as well as that, they've got some other applications that are generating websites directly from the backend database as well. So we have an API interface for it. So that's a brief overview of how Cars Ireland works as a business. So the Cars Ireland website itself, it was a traditional LAMP website, more or less, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. But it had some, before we came on board, it had some big problems with performance. So I touched on this earlier on, but previous to our work, they put the site behind Cloudflare and used some geo-blocking abilities at the Cloudflare level, and that helps to a large degree. As well as that, they've used Cloudflare's caching abilities, and it was a very crude 1 hour cache lifetime on every page. So that made that some pages didn't show up very quickly on the website. If changes were made, they might have had to wait at least the hour or possibly 2 hours, depending on how things worked. And this was, a situation that we wanted or had to be resolved as part of the new build. And the other thing that the other website suffered from was essentially just old age. It had been around a while. It had gathered a lot of cruft over the years. It had seen a number of different engineering approaches to different parts of the website. So they were looking for a solid foundation to recover from those years, so to speak, but also to have a solid foundation for future growth. So this was sort of a step to the side slightly, rebuild the website and get ready for future growth and to do newer and more interesting things. So after some analysis, they settled on Drupal. They had been using Drupal and still do use Drupal in-house for a number of smaller projects. So they knew what it was capable of, but they knew that they did need some experts, and that's where we come in. So the new site is rebuilt from scratch, and as I've mentioned, they have developed a brand new API for us to interact with it. So this is something that they see this as being an important future differentiator for the business, is that they'll have an API available that different endpoints will be able to use, or different applications will be able to use. But right now, it's pretty much just the website that consumes that API, and that will become relevant when we talk about sort of future plans. They had very strong SEO requirements. This is a business that lives and dies by serving traffic well and being well ranked on the search engines. So as well as the existing URLs they had in place and the multiplicity of redirects and shadow pages and all that kind of stuff that was already there, that all had to be preserved. Plus, we had to improve on things on SEO. So the search engine landing pages that I showcased, that's something that we made a significant improvement on. It's something that they couldn't really do under the old site with those nice clean URLs. That's something we were able to deliver as part of the rebuild. So the SEO requirements were big, and reliability was important too. So it wasn't just that the website itself was going to be reliable, it's just that what underpinned it had to be reliable as well. So yeah, it wasn't enough to have a well-built MySQL site. There had to be something stronger underneath it as well. So I've touched on this briefly, but just talk again about why Drupal. And one of the things was to get away from having something totally custom built in-house, that when new developers came on board or they wanted to make future development on the website, they needed to have a solid platform they can build on. And Drupal fitted that very well. They knew that it can perform for large-scale websites. And they knew that at this stage, Drupal 8 was definitely on the cards, and the fact that it was rebuilt on Symfony was a strong plus, because they would have done some Symfony stuff in-house as well. So they knew that it could scale well and perform well. As we already touched on, it would do well from an SEO perspective as well. And one of the key things, of course, was good integration. So as part of the puzzle, we always knew that Cloudflare was going to be in place, but over time we have Cloudflare, Solar, Varnish, MySQL, Amazon Web Services, a lot of different interaction points throughout the whole system, and it was important that what was at the center of this integrated very well with those external systems. The other thing that swung Drupal in its favor was Acquia's hosting. So this was something when they were looking at a new platform, they wanted to be able to, as well as offloading, say, the development and the maintenance of the platform itself, which isn't really their core business. Their core business is helping dealers to sell cars. That's their core business. Their core business is not necessarily the technology. So they looked to outsource the hosting as well. And when they did some investigation for the hosting options for various different platforms, that's where Acquia's enterprise hosting solution really sort of helped seal the whole package. And that's something that, it definitely helped put a really solid foundation in place. Now, one of the other things that you will have seen on the site is heavy use of Typesense. So Typesense is an instant search interface, is what it advertises itself as. And we saw from the demo there that it gave pretty useful responses. I'm going to just take a pause for a second and double check that everything's working correctly. So bear with me. Pop in. Nobody's complaining, so things must be working well. Okay, so let's restart that again. Okay, so back to the presentation. Typesense, yes, an instant search application. And Typesense wasn't part of the brief. So what happened with the website was we built as per designs and specifications and interactions with the client, and we came back with a very good search interface. And that's the words I use carefully, very good. It was very good, but it wasn't exceptional. So obviously, as with any website, as you're building the website, you take frequent looks at what competitors are doing and what leading edge websites might be doing. And every time we looked at the competitors' websites, and in particular, what we saw was done really well, not necessarily in the Irish market, but across Europe, the search interfaces were definitely faster. So we knew that in order for this project to be a roaring success, we had to do better at the search level. So even though we were all done and everyone was relatively happy with it, we had a look around. So what we did was we had a look at Algolia, which is another instant search interface, and we had investigated Algolia on a number of projects, but the pricing didn't quite stack up for this project, at least at the time. So what happens when you're on the typical customer journey on Cars Ireland is not just to make one search and then just click the top of the search results, but people will frequently spend a lot of time in the search interface making search after search after search. So filter, start again, filter again. And when we sort of did a pricing analysis versus the Algolia pricing at the time, it just wasn't going to be feasible. So we had to look at something else. And to be honest, we stumbled across Typesense, I suppose, a couple of years ago, and then it came back onto our horizon again with the announcement of Typesense Cloud. So that meant that we had an instant search interface, which is Algolia API compliant, but also had a cloud-based hosting solution as well. So this ticked a lot of boxes for us. So we did our maths based on the pricing and how that will work out. That seems reasonable. This is all done on our own time. We hadn't talked to the client yet. We decided it was worthwhile to build a proof of concept to show to the client as to how much better it could be. So we built the proof of concept. We didn't put a lot of time into it. It was definitely a challenge for the developers. So we're a relatively traditional Drupal company. We don't and would not and still do not do an awful lot of React. So we picked our best JavaScript developers and they got stuck in and built a mini React application using the Typesense API, and we indexed some of the content and we came back with a demo. And the demo went very, very well. So we'd flagged it in advance that, we really should have everybody on board for this call. We did the demo, it went really, really well, and we gave them some time to think about it. They were back pretty much straight away saying, we can't go back to the old search interface. This is so much better that it's impossible to unsee it, was the line that they used. So we got the go ahead to rejig the search entirely. And it might not seem like a big thing, but the old search interface was very much reliant on select multiple search interfaces or search parameters, then click the search button at the bottom. Whereas now, every time we change any search parameter, a new search is done in the background. So there weren't drastic changes to the design for the search, but there were lots of subtle changes to the design. So to widgets in particular, and how people input the data. So that's how Typesense came into being, and we worked very closely with Typesense Cloud to make sure that that interface, that hosting platform is as strong as Cloudflare and as Acquia is, because those three parts are key to making sure this website stays up and running the whole time. So let's talk about generating the website. So the content itself is not input onto the Drupal website by editors or car dealers or anything like that. Cars Ireland make their data available through an API endpoint. So we pull that API endpoint on a constant basis. We get some JSON back, and we use the JSON to generate nodes and taxonomy terms. So all of the car details, things like make and model, they're all taxonomy terms. And then the dealers and the vehicles, the cars themselves, they're all nodes. So that we use the migrate API to do that. So we've got a series of queues and drush commands that basically keep that going on an ongoing basis to keep generating and updating the nodes on the website. And that's working very well for us. But there's a number of other moving parts that need to be updated as soon as we get the content into it. So we take particular care to make sure that items are indexed as soon as possible. So we were not just waiting for a cron run per se to get the index up to date. We need to make sure things get into the search index on as good as immediately. Similarly, the external search index, the Typesense index, we need to update that instantly as well. So what we do in the background there is, again, we use Drupal's queues extensively, and we pull and hit the Typesense endpoint to update the data. And that works pretty well as well. We are able to get results in as soon as a node is available. It's also available in the Typesense index as well. So there's no waiting for car ads to show up. We're confident that once they're in the API, they should be available on the website within 2 minutes. We could possibly get that faster, but the risk return wouldn't quite be there. Okay. So that code that we used to push up to Typesense, that was all written from scratch by our team in-house. And I know that some of it has been contributed back to Drupal.org as well. The other thing that we need to do on an ongoing basis is to generate those search engine results pages I showed earlier on. So the way those pages work is that they're dynamically built based on the URL parameters, but it hits the Solr index to generate those pages and return HTML. So it's not quite a view that returns it. It is a custom callback that's used, and that's one of the reasons for that is we needed to have the URLs needed to be dynamic, so you could have different things in the URL path representing different taxonomies. And we found that a little bit tricky at the views layer, and we get a bit more, actually we get a lot more flexibility from doing it as custom callbacks instead. So that's the general process of generating the website. It's not a one-off thing, it's an ongoing thing. We have a lot of, because of so many moving parts, the other things we have to do is we have to update Cloudflare, or to be more accurate, we have to purge the Cloudflare cache. So every time a car is updated, or an SEO page, the content's been updated, we need to let Cloudflare know that that page needs to be purged, so a fresh copy is generated from Drupal. So again, we've got that running in the background as well to make sure that as many pages as possible live at the edge layer for as long as possible, but as soon as there's an update, we purge it so they can get a fresh copy from Drupal as well. We're also doing a similar process with the varnish edge cache as well. We had got to a point where we were letting everything live at the edge layer for forever, essentially, and we would just purge it when they got updated. But the volume of updates that came through was a bit prohibitive, and there really wasn't a benefit for, setting something into the cache and then just purging it from the cache every 5 minutes. It didn't make a lot of sense. So what we did was instead we gave them longer cache lifetimes, and we don't bother trying to purge them then. So things like used cars in Dublin, that lives in the cache for maybe 15 minutes, I think. We were tweaking these values for different pages to try and get the benefit of freshness over speed. It's a bit of a tricky balance to follow with these pages. Okay, so that's how we generate the website itself. There is some non-API content in there. There's some reviews, but they're primarily for SEO purposes. And even then, some of that content comes from an RSS feed initially and is tidied up a little before sent for publication. But it's not the primary business of the website. Okay, custom analytics. So this is another interesting part of this website, and we talked at the very start about the business model for Cars Ireland, and one of the key things is how everything performs from a dealer perspective. So they did a lot of analysis, and they talked to their customers, the dealers, and said, well, what do you need to know about all of your ads on the website? And hitherto, they couldn't really tell them an awful lot about what happened on the website with any great detail, like how often does a car show up in the search engine results? What positions does it show up? If I promote the ad, what difference will it make to how many impressions I get and how many people click through to the full ad? When people are on the ad, what do they do? Do they click around? Do they send me a text? All these kind of things. So we worked with Cars Ireland, and basically all of that information has been tracked in custom analytics, and we built an Amazon endpoint to process that data. So we basically fill up a queue of all these events that happen on the website. So you saw an example of it very briefly when we went through the demo of the site. All of the stuff that happens on page and on page load, and that gets logged to a custom Amazon endpoint and put into a queue. And what Cars Ireland do on their side is they process that and push it into their database or a separate analytics database, and it's tied with their desktop application now, so that dealers can see exactly how well things are doing. They can see whether it's worth promoting one type of car ad or not promoting another type of car ad. So they get much better value for money and better value reporting on their ads. So these aren't vanity metrics. These are real world things that dealers need on an ongoing basis to know how things are going. And for perspective, the used car market is relatively buoyant in Ireland at the moment, and I guess worldwide, because new cars they're in short supply because of the chip shortages. So that's been good for dealers in some ways, in that they're able to charge higher premium for older cars, but obviously they can't sell as many new cars. So that's the custom analytics. Let's talk about upstream reporting. So this isn't a website where we just get to consume the data and it just sits on our website and the provider of the data doesn't know anything about it. So we have to do a lot of custom upstream reporting. So we report back, again, this time we're directly pushing to Amazon AWS queues, various events that happen on the website. So the purpose of this is that the backend database knows what's happening on the website. So every time an ad is updated or added, we send some information back. And the same applies to things like when we update the solar index, when we update the Typesense index, when we flush things from Cloudflare. All of that information is logged into queues so that Cars Ireland have a very detailed overview of what exactly is live on the website at any one point in time. And that's proven very useful because, like any systems, there's occasional glitches, but that's been really helpful in trying to find out exactly what's gone wrong, because you can see what ads are causing problems or haven't performed correctly. So we're able to dig in and find out what's going on. And most of the time, it tends to be an issue with the API, or to be more accurate, an issue with the data that comes through via the API. So the data that comes from the API, I talked a lot about how dealers interact with the API and how they push information up, but there are other sources for car ads as well. So other indexes or providers of data that push through to the database and again follows down to our API. And that data isn't always as clean as we'd like it to be. And occasionally that causes minor problems. But we're able to, through the use of this upstream reporting, we're able to identify where the problems are and dig in and find out exactly what the issues is pretty quickly. The other thing that we report on is, we talked about the analytics, but as well as that, every time someone uses the inquiry forms or uses the text to dealer details, again, that gets logged upstream as well, so that both Cars Ireland and the dealers know exactly how well the ads are performed, and they can match, links from the website to how well they promoted it or how well they've priced the vehicles and things like that as well. Okay, so that's the upstream reporting. Challenges for developers. Yeah, so this website, like a lot of websites, presented challenges to us, and to be honest with you, that's why we're in business. We like challenging work. We don't like to do, like a lot of people, we don't like to do the same thing over and over again. We like to take on challenges and try and put some solid engineering around them and make robust solutions. So the most challenging aspect of this website was certainly the ongoing development of the API. So again, like I mentioned, this is a relatively new and custom API that's mainly been used for this website, though to a certain degree it's been used for the native applications as well. But we found that things that we needed to be added to the API on a relatively ongoing basis. And this isn't ideal. Ideally, the API is done and dusted, and then you come in to do your work afterwards. But we got into a flow of how we, find issues, log the issues, get them fixed upstream, and get them rolled out. But it's definitely it was a challenge for us as we went through it. The other challenges were dealing with new technologies. So this is, like I mentioned before, a challenge both in a good sense and in a negative sense. Negative in that it's something you haven't ever heard of and you got a lot of work to do, but positive in that you get to learn something new. So the Typesense API and the Typesense application were all brand new to us. We had to work out how we would integrate it with Drupal. We had to work out how we could best use it to present a really fast interface. And there, you can have all the examples in the world, but until you start digging into the data that you have and how you best present it, that's when you really know what works and what doesn't work. This for a few developers who had some React experience, this gave them a chance to really build a fairly fully fledged React application. And we're not saying that it's the perfect React application. We know there's definitely room for improvement on it. And I know that we work with Cars Ireland on an ongoing basis now, developing new features and doing maintenance and catching up on all the work that we would have liked to do during the initial build, but didn't really have time for or budget for, perhaps. And one of those is constantly tuning that React application. We think it can be faster. We think that it could even, the numbers might be measured in milliseconds, but we think we can still make it faster. Although we're almost at the point now where if you've got any kind of decent connection, the website really does live up to the instant search moniker on it. So the other challenges, there were lots of moving parts to this website. So I've gone through them all on the web up to now, but really that's a challenge, even in terms of your local development environment, to try and set up something that replicates production in its entirety can be a bit of a challenge, because we're dealing with external services like Typesense, like Cloudflare, but we come up with some really clever solutions. So we can, in particular, we can mimic the Typesense cloud. Because it's an open source project, we use we're able to replicate that locally using Doxal, which is our preferred development environment. So we can spin up a local Doxal environment and test against that very, very well. So this was something that again, we learned to extend Doxal to make sure we could do that over the course of the project. Caching and performance targets were aggressive and tricky to meet, but we're happy that we did it. One thing that we did spend a lot of time on in particular were the HTTP headers that we send. So we adjust the headers for how long things can be stored in the browser versus how long they're stored in the cache endpoints. So things like in Cloudflare, an item might be stored in your browser for an hour, but it would only live in Cloudflare for 15 minutes. So what this means is that, and then for certain pages, we want them to live in Cloudflare for only a short time to make sure they're constantly refreshed, like the home page or the search page. But even if the search page is updated, say once every 15 minutes, that's still only 4 requests hitting the backend server for a page that will definitely get hit thousands of times a minute in some cases. So the performance objectives have definitely been hit by use of clever caching in that way. Drupal's got a HTTP cache module, which helped us in tweaking those values in terms of tweaking the headers that we sent across the wire to the different layers within the caching. Caching performance. Yeah, I think that covers the main sort of challenges that we had to hit during the website itself. Now, how am I doing for time? Not so bad. Okay, future enhancement. So, when the dust settles on projects like this, you have a bit of time to sit back and think and go, well, what will we do next? And the one that it's somewhat ironic that the one part that's very reliable and very solid is possibly the first thing we'd remove. So the Solar and Search API backend has been rock solid, but it's another moving part that we don't really need anymore because we don't need 2 different search indexes. We think that we can replace the Solar index with the Typesense index that's already there to generate those pages. And that, while it is a very reliable part of the picture at the moment, every time you remove something, you improve overall system reliability. So this is certainly nothing against Solar. It's just the idea of removing one moving part. The other thing is that we need to do some extensive SEO searching on this or testing on this, but it could be that the dynamically generated pages via Typesense would be equally performant from a search engine perspective. Now, as you can appreciate, SEO is a huge part of this business, so this isn't something that they're going to jump into. But again, it lets us remove some more custom work on our side, and again, improve overall system reliability. And that's the thing. Sometimes you might look at something and go, well, that's working perfectly well, and there's no need to remove it. And there's an element of truth in that, but the reality is the less moving parts, the better. And we've got a lot on this that we think we could improve on. The API is a bit of a contentious one. It is a lot of work on their side to maintain and keep up to date. And we feel that maybe we would be as well off to just hit the database backend directly. So they've got other applications which have got access to its database. There would be a lot of security hurdles to jump through to make sure we could do that in a secure fashion. But we think that removing the API and hitting the database directly would again remove a moving part. So the API would not need to be maintained and versioned and documented and all that kind of stuff. As long as we get access to the database, which has already got its own systems in place, then we could use the Migrate API and just keep things up to date using that as well. So that's something we might look into at some point. Noise is a problem on this website, or to be more accurate, it's a problem with the data. So in the past, if a dealer wanted a car to, go back up to the top of a search engine result, they would just edit it and save it on the API, and that would bring it up to the top. And that's definitely an issue because it means there's no real value from that update. There's no there's no changes to the values that have been sent across. So that's essentially noise. And then on the other side, like I mentioned, there is this external source of data that Cars Ireland subscribe to for car ads, and that is not from their dealer APIs. Again, we see similar stuff there where a load of ads get sent through, or there's no real updates made. They just mark, they just click save and it gets sent across again. And so this noise is something we can live without because we're constantly running everything through the caches and running it through the API integration layer. And if we could find a way to reduce that noise, that would definitely help things as well. The other thing that we might get rid of is the custom analytics. So even though it's, again, very useful and very powerful and it solves a lot of business problems, it really shouldn't be fully custom. There are good analytics engines out there. And again, it might be better in the same way that this new website is built on Drupal. It's not built from scratch using custom PHP scripts. We think using some of those custom analytics engines is something worth looking at in the future. And it's something that we've done on other projects with good success. Okay, so that about covers my talk about this website. So I'm going to flick back out of this and go back and see if there's any questions. If I can remember how to do that. Okay, so I've stopped sharing. And Q&A. No Q&A yet. Okay, are people still hearing me? Can someone give us a comment here just to say things are at least still working? Okay, thanks, Daniel. Okay, good stuff. So, yes, any questions or comments anyone wants to make? There's a few Anertech people lurking. Do you want to contradict / correct / update me on some mistakes I may have made along the way? Solar. So question from Stella Power. Don't know who she is. Anyway, solar only used for the SEO pages. Yes, that's correct. So solar is not used for searching. It's only used for generating the search engine pages themselves. Obviously, solar was used initially. So like I said, Typesense only came into play when we looked at the finished search product and thought it's good, but it's not brilliant. So hitherto solar was used there. That obviously at the front end has been replaced by Typesense, but solar still exists at the back for generating the SEO pages. At least it currently does anyway. Using Search API interact with Typesense. That is on the cards. It's on the agenda. So basically, right now, no, we're not. We're interacting with the Typesense API directly. We did look at building, and I know Chris has done some work on this, on basically building a Search API backend that integrates directly with Typesense. And he's done some work on that. It's not currently in play on the website itself yet. However, where we'd go with that would be dependent on what we decide to remove or where we decide to go next. So we could, and I think the big question there would be to determine what the search engine, the SEO implications would be. So could we, yeah, that's the link there. We could, if we were happy from a search engine perspective that the Typesense pages, the JavaScript powered Typesense pages were just as performant as the SEO pages, that would definitely color how we'd change things going forward. And I think that's kind of the big part that would need to be satisfactorily answered before we'd make any large scale changes. So what we could do is drop, we could do two things. One, we could go with a, like you mentioned there, a Search API backend, and that would work to a degree. Or we could just drop Solar entirely and Search API entirely and just interact with Typesense, and then use our custom pages to hit the Typesense index as opposed to the Solar index. But I have a feeling that there would be no SEO impact from using the Typesense generated pages directly anyway. And if that was the case, then we could remove a good few moving parts. So like I said, it's not something that could be done trivially. So we'd have to make sure it all works before we do that.